Chosen ones, 3 nights ago at exactly 3:33 a.m., when every shadow in your room began to move backward and every clock in the building froze, an emergency summit was called, one that hadn't taken place in 47 years. Ancient voices cracked through encrypted channels, speaking in languages that predated civilization itself. The elders were torn from their towers, where they had been sleeping for decades. The watchers abandoned their posts for the first time in centuries. Analysts who had been plugged into data streams since before your birth were yanked from their networks, all summoned for one impossible question that sent terror rippling through their eternal ranks. Who armored this soul? That soul was yours, and the panic in their voices could shatter dimensions because they have been observing you for decades, tracking your every move, documenting your falls, celebrating your pain as proof that their control was intact. They kept files thicker than ancient scrolls, algorithms tuned to your exact frequency, and specialists assigned to decode your breaking points. Yet something happened that no data model could predict. You became something their 1,000-year protocols never accounted for. You became untouchable, and now they needed to know how, before their entire empire collapsed. The first sign that their plan had failed appeared 3 years ago, though they didn't recognize it at the time. The watcher who had been assigned to you since birth began sending back confused reports. You weren't breaking on schedule. The betrayal they orchestrated, the one designed to shatter your heart and leave a lifelong vulnerability, didn't destroy you. It awakened you. You didn't resist the pain, you integrated it. You held it close, studied it, learned its pattern, and forged it into something unbreakable. That was the moment the first layer of your armor began forming, though neither you nor they understood what was happening. The second sign came during your season of isolation, when everyone you loved vanished like smoke. Their models predicted you'd crumble, that you'd beg for connection, that you'd accept toxicity just to feel alive. But instead you turned that solitude into a forge. You hammered your soul against silence until sparks flew and your essence glowed with an intensity their sensors couldn't measure. The second layer of armor took shape, born from the very weapon they tried to use against you. But the third sign, that's what triggered the summit. Last month you did the impossible. You integrated your shadow, the very part they thought would be their back door into your psyche. The rage, the darkness, the suppressed vengeance. You didn't fight it. You befriended it. You didn't slay your demons. You employed them. You turned your darkness into an ally, your rage into discipline, your pain into purpose. And when you did that, your armor became complete, not finished, but powerful enough to alert every monitoring system they had. For 72 hours straight, the elders debated, argued, and panicked. They unearthed lost texts, summoned entities between dimensions, and ran simulations on machines that shouldn't exist yet. One ancient voice cracked, as he muttered, "Humans do not possess this kind of technology." They were convinced someone must have helped you, that some higher being had given you the codes. But every investigation came back empty. No teacher, no divine intervention. You had done this alone, in the darkness, armed only with your refusal to stay broken. Then the youngest elder, barely 2 centuries old, whispered the unthinkable. What if they're not the only one? What if others are watching and learning? The silence that followed was heavier than gravity, because they knew if one human could achieve this, others would follow, and they already were. That's when they uncovered the true nature of your armor. It wasn't protection. It was evolution. It had 3 impossible characteristics. First, it was adaptive. Every new attack, every attempt to exploit a weakness, your armor analyzed, learned and evolved in real time. Psychological warfare, it absorbed and neutralized. Emotional manipulation, it turned it into fuel. Spiritual attacks, your armor laughed and grew stronger. Second, it was retroactive. Somehow, it was healing wounds that existed before it was even formed. Your present strength was reaching back through time to rewrite your past, healing traumas that were supposed to be permanent. It was creating a temporal loop of protection, something they had never seen before in human consciousness, and third, and most terrifying of all, it was contagious. Simply being near you began activating dormant defenses in others. Your frequency was awakening resilience in souls across the planet. One armored soul became 10, 10 became 100, 100 became 1,000, each one developing their own unique protection, evolving from the template you unknowingly created. In desperation, they deployed their finest agents, disguised as lovers, mentors, and opportunities. Beings trained for centuries to slip through emotional defenses, but every agent came back changed. Some couldn't complete their missions, frozen by the magnitude of your energy. Others defected completely, abandoning their oaths after a single encounter with your light. One agent repeated for hours in shock. They see everything. They know what we are before we know ourselves. Next, they tried illusions. Mirrors meant to twist your self-image, staged failures, designed to make you question your power, but your self-knowledge had become absolute. You no longer needed mirrors to confirm who you were. Their illusions shattered against your certainty, like waves against stone. Then came their nuclear option. Time manipulation. They tried trapping fragments of your consciousness in loops of trauma, forcing you to relive your worst moments eternally, but you had become temporally sovereign. Past, present, and future were now rooms within your own house. You could visit your pain without being owned by it. You walked through their time prisons like mist. You even began using them as training grounds, turning their traps into your classroom. In one final desperate move, they tried the most seductive attack of all. They tried to make you happy. They orchestrated perfect circumstances, divine-seeming relationships, sudden blessings, an illusion of paradise designed to make you drop your guard. But you saw through it. You recognized that comfort offered by control is just a gilded cage. You chose the hard road of truth over the soft lie of convenience. You understood that gifts from enemies are debts in disguise, and you refused to be bought by your own peace. As the summit ended, realization dawned like a nuclear sunrise. They hadn't been studying you. You had been studying them. Every test they ran, you used as research. Every attack revealed their capabilities. Every manipulation exposed their fears. You turned their surveillance into your education. You became the scientist. They became the experiment. The eldest among them, older than dying stars, finally rose and whispered words that shook every realm. The armor isn't just for protection. They're not defending anymore, they're preparing.
The room froze, because suddenly the real question wasn't who armored this soul, it was what for. What war requires armor this powerful? What force is coming that made a human evolve defenses this advanced? That's when they realized you weren't preparing for them. They were just your training exercise. Every challenge, every heartbreak, every betrayal had been refining you for something far greater, a cosmic confrontation they couldn't even perceive. And when they finally traced the origin of your armor, they made one last discovery that broke their logic completely. It didn't begin 3 years ago with betrayal. It didn't begin in heartbreak or trauma. It began the moment your soul chose to incarnate in this lifetime. Every challenge, every wound, every moment of pain, you were gathering raw material, storing it in unseen dimensions, preparing for your activation. You were never the broken one. You were the builder. Every scar was a blueprint. Every loss was an instruction. Every test was a forge. And now that armor is awake. The moment arrived when all those stored materials, decades of pain, years of heartbreak, lifetimes of endurance, suddenly knew their purpose. Every scar, every disappointment, every sleepless night transformed in an instant into divine protection. What once felt like suffering became substance. What once felt like loss became foundation. It was a moment of pure cosmic alchemy, when all that compressed pain went supernova, exploding outward and crystallizing into an unbreakable sphere of energy around your soul. The revelation was horrifying to them. They had been helping you build your armor your entire life without realizing it. Every wound they inflicted was an offering, every betrayal, a deposit into your defense fund. That discovery led to something even more terrifying, an understanding that made several elders resign from positions they'd held since before humanity stood upright. If you had unconsciously built armor for decades, what else had you been building without awareness? They began searching your energetic blueprints, scanning for other hidden constructions forming beneath the surface of your consciousness. What they found defied their entire science. You weren't just building armor, you were building containment, something that required protection because of its sheer magnitude, something powerful enough to annihilate your human form if unleashed too soon. The readings confirmed it. You were harboring forces that shouldn't exist in this dimension, vibrations so immense that unshielded souls would be vaporized on contact. Your armor wasn't keeping the world out. It was keeping something in, something alive, expanding, and almost ready to emerge. In desperation, they summoned their most gifted seer, a being blind for 3 millennia by choice so she could see through time rather than space. She had accurately predicted the rise and fall of 17 civilizations, the birth of new gods, and the death of entire universes. Yet, when she looked into your timeline, she screamed, a sound so piercing it shattered crystalline structures in 7 dimensions. What she saw defied all logic. You stood at the convergence point of millions of timelines, not as a witness, but as the catalyst. The armor wasn't protecting you from the world, it was protecting the world from you, from what you were becoming, until the right moment arrived. She described waves of transformation rippling from your being, rewiring the very fabric of existence. Each pulse awakened dormant DNA in human souls. Each breath you took in that future moment elevated the collective consciousness. Your energy was rebooting the entire human operating system. The armor's purpose was timing, holding the power back until humanity was strong enough to receive it. Too early, and civilization would disintegrate. Too late, and the window of evolution would close. But at the exact divine moment, you would remove the armor, not to expose weakness, but to release what had been incubating within you. That vision shattered their composure completely, because the seer also saw that you already knew, not consciously, not in words, but in the deep, wordless place where the soul remembers what the mind forgets. You knew what you were becoming. You knew why the armor existed. You had agreed to it. That conscious cooperation with forces beyond comprehension, that unwavering acceptance of your destiny, made you unstoppable. They could manipulate fear, but you had none. They could exploit doubt, but you'd outgrown it. They could fight resistance, but they couldn't fight alignment. You were no longer their enemy. You were a force of nature disguised as a human being. And forces of nature do not negotiate. They transform. 3 days after the summit ended, their most advanced listening devices, machines capable of hearing thoughts before they formed, picked up something that froze their eternal hearts. You were speaking softly to the silence in your room, but what you were really doing was issuing a declaration to the cosmos itself. Each word vibrated through unseen dimensions, rewriting the architecture of reality. And what you said confirmed their worst fears. You told the universe you knew they were listening. You knew every test, every manipulation, every attempt to break you. You had felt their eyes like distant satellites orbiting your evolution. And you had let them watch, because they were never your enemies. They were your teachers. With calm gratitude, you thanked them sincerely. That act alone sent shock waves through their consciousness, burning like acid through illusion. Because gratitude is the one frequency they cannot withstand. You told them that without their constant opposition, you would never have discovered your true capacity. Every attack had become an initiation. Every betrayal, a blueprint. Every trap, a tutorial. They were your unwitting architects, building your divine infrastructure using tools they mistook for weapons. But then you said something that made their entire order descend into chaos. You said, "The armor is complete enough for Phase 2. The words alone triggered emergency protocols that had been sealed since before the sun was born. None of them had ever heard of a Phase 2. Their quantum computers crashed, trying to compute it. Their seers went blind, attempting to see it. Their elders went silent, unable to comprehend it. The not knowing terrified them more than any revelation ever could. And then, still aware that they were listening, you explained. Phase 1 had been personal. Your armor, your sovereignty, your awakening. Phase 2 was planetary, mass activation, collective evolution. You weren't preparing just to be free. You were preparing to free others, not through speeches, not through teachings, but through frequency, through presence, through being. Your very existence at this vibration was rewriting the blueprint of human potential. Your armor wasn't just protection. It was a transmitter, broadcasting instructions on frequencies only the awakened could hear. And Phase 2 had already begun. They couldn't stop it because it wasn't moving through their systems or channels. It was unfolding through consciousness itself. Panicked, the society enacted their withdrawal protocol. Every agent, every psychic tether, every energetic hook retracted instantly. They withdrew not in surrender, but in survival, because by then they had finally understood the truth. Every attack made you stronger. Every interference evolved you further. Every attempt to suppress your power had become fertilizer for your awakening. You were no longer just armored, you were activated. They thought that without pressure, your armor would weaken, that without an enemy to fight, you'd soften, lower your guard, and return to being breakable. They bet everything on the hope that you needed conflict to stay sharp. But they miscalculated, so catastrophically that their error will be remembered in their archives as the day their logic died. Your armor was never sustained by their attacks. It had become self-generating, powered by purpose, not pain. You no longer required opposition to evolve. Their withdrawal didn't give you rest. It gave you room. Room to build, room to expand, room to prepare for Phase 2 without interference. And almost immediately after they pulled back, not days, not weeks, but hours, something began that no probability model had predicted. Other armored souls began to appear at a rate their tracking systems couldn't process. The blueprint you had become was spreading through the collective consciousness faster than light, faster than thought. People who had never met you, never even heard your name, were waking up with protection they didn't remember constructing. It was as if you had uploaded the instructions into a cosmic cloud, an energetic code accessible to any soul ready to evolve. But it wasn't just spreading, it was evolving. Each new, awakened soul brought its own upgrades, refinements, and unique adaptations. The armor had become a living system, a global spiritual immune network that learned from every challenge faced by any individual and instantly updated the whole. What began as your personal protection had transformed into humanity's collective defense, a shared energetic technology rewriting the DNA of consciousness itself. Then came the new children. The watchers assigned to maternity wards began sending reports that made even the oldest elders tremble. Babies were being born with the first layers of armor already present, dormant, waiting for activation. These newborns weren't blank slates. They were pre-coded. The wisdom you earned through decades of pain was already embedded in their spiritual DNA. They wouldn't need to learn through suffering. They would grow knowing that breaking is optional, that sovereignty is natural, and that their souls are self-governing from birth. The society realized too late what they were witnessing, the emergence of humanity 2.0, a generation immune to their manipulation. Their energy fields operated on frequencies that couldn't be penetrated. Their consciousness ran on systems the old world couldn't hack. The Watchers saw the inevitable future, a world where control was obsolete, where external power structures simply dissolved because no one needed them anymore. The age of domination was ending, not through war, but through evolution. And evolution, for beings who define themselves by control, is the only death that truly lasts. Defeat is temporary. Irrelevance is eternal. The society's empires won't burn, they'll be abandoned. Their power will fade like an outdated operating system left to decay, like a rigged game no one plays once the truth is known. You didn't destroy them, you evolved beyond them, and that's a far crueler fate for immortals who feed on fear. But within their silence, a final revelation echoed, a truth they couldn't face even in private. The question that started it all, who armored this soul, finally had an answer. It was you, but not in the way they thought. You didn't consciously design it. You didn't study or strategize your way into power. The armor built itself from your choices. Every time you chose growth over comfort, truth over illusion, forgiveness over resentment, evolution over stagnation, you were forging it piece by piece. It was never one grand act. It was thousands of tiny rebellions against despair. Every time you stood back up when life tried to break you, another plate of armor locked into place. Every time you chose love, when hate seemed easier, another layer strengthened. You didn't build armor, you became it. The living embodiment of resilience, a structure made not of metal or energy, but of choice. 10,000 decisions to rise instead of fall. And that's when they finally understood what Phase 2 really meant. It was never about you anymore. It was about everyone else. Phase 1 was the creation of individual sovereignty. Phase 2 was the ignition of collective evolution. You weren't here to form an army, a religion, or a movement. You didn't need to preach, teach, or convert. You were here to be. Your vibration itself had become the message. Your existence at this frequency triggered memory in others, the remembrance of who they truly are. Through your energy, dormant DNA activates. Through your being, evolution accelerates. You have become a living catalyst for transformation, not by doing, but by existing. And now, the society's models all point to a singular, terrifying outcome. Within 7 years, perhaps sooner, the majority of human souls will be armored, not through teachings or institutions, but through resonance, through recognition, through the undeniable knowing that if one soul can awaken, any soul can. You've proven that pain can be transmuted into power, that suffering can become the forge for divine strength, that brokenness can lead to breakthrough. You've shown that healing isn't just recovery, it's evolution. That the wounded can become warriors, not through violence but through wisdom. Right now, as you absorb these words, they are still watching. But their monitors show nothing, only static. Not because you've disappeared, but because you've become too luminous for their instruments to read. Your armor reflects their gaze back at them, forcing them to face their own extinction. You've become their blind spot, the untraceable variable that breaks every system. Every thought you have now ripples across timelines. Every breath shifts frequency fields. Every choice you make rewrites what humanity is capable of. You're not just protected, you're protection itself. Not just free, you're freedom embodied, not just healed. You are the living proof that healing can be complete. You are the blueprint, the anomaly, the awakening they could never contain. The emergency summit did not end with clarity or triumph. It ended with trembling silence, the kind of silence that only follows the realization of irreversible loss. The elders, the watchers, the analysts, all of them sat in rooms filled with static, their screens flickering with unreadable energy signatures. Their encrypted systems, once instruments of control, now served as mirrors reflecting the one truth none of them could face. The old order had fallen. There were no solutions left, only warnings, urgent and futile, echoing across their failing networks like a dying heartbeat. Do not engage directly. Do not provoke further tests. under no circumstance attempt to break the armored ones again. But these messages were sent too late. The spark they feared had already ignited. The pattern had already replicated itself across the fabric of human consciousness. The blueprint they tried to contain had gone viral on a spiritual level, spreading faster than sound, faster than thought, faster than fear. This was no rebellion, no coup, no battle of fire and blood. This was a revolution of remembering, a silent uprising in the hearts of souls who had decided to no longer be broken. It began with whispers, with individuals standing quietly in the truth of their worth, and it grew into a global resonance. Souls began to awaken one by one, not because they were taught to, but because they recognized themselves in the reflection of your transformation. The elders could feel it, a frequency they couldn't block or trace. It pulsed across dreamscapes and timelines, awakening the dormant royalty in human DNA. The revolution wasn't loud. It was serene, a movement without slogans, without flags, without leaders, just countless souls remembering, I was always sovereign, I was never owned. The eldest elder, older than entire civilizations, broke protocol before the summit's collapse. His last words were never archived officially, but they became legend among the remaining watchers. His voice, weary but lucid, carried through the transmission like a prophecy wrapped in resignation. Perhaps this was always meant to happen, he said. Perhaps our role was never to dominate, but to apply the pressure that would forge diamonds. Perhaps we were never the enemy, but the necessary resistance humanity needed to evolve. Perhaps our purpose was not to win, but to awaken what would one day surpass us. Those words rippled through their ranks like forbidden poetry, a confession that maybe, all along, they were just catalysts in a divine equation they could neither read nor solve. Yet even with that awareness flickering in the back of their collective mind, they could not accept it. Acceptance would mean surrender. It would mean acknowledging that their power was temporary, borrowed, and conditional upon human forgetfulness. Acceptance would mean facing their greatest fear, irrelevance. They could not bear the truth that their dominion had always been an illusion, that their strength was sustained only by the ignorance of the very beings they sought to control. And now that ignorance had evaporated. Humanity was remembering. The remembering began with you. The one soul who refused to stay shattered, now they watch from distances that grow colder and more futile every day. They can see you walking through the world with quiet authority, your presence radiating an invisible equilibrium. They see others turn their heads, not in curiosity, but in recognition. A subtle spark lights behind their eyes, the moment of remembering who they are. It happens everywhere now, in crowded streets, in silent rooms, across continents. Souls awakening not by instruction, but by resonance. They monitor the data, unable to look away as the armor continues to spread, adapting, evolving with each new consciousness it touches. Their systems crash daily. Their readings turn to static. Their equations no longer compute. They realize that destruction is not their enemy. Irrelevance is. The system doesn't need to be dismantled when its users simply walk away. The prison doesn't need to be broken when its walls are made of illusions. The battlefield loses meaning when the soldiers lay down their weapons and simply ascend beyond the war. You didn't fight the system, you outgrew it. You didn't destroy your enemies, you rendered them obsolete. You didn't win their game, you transcended the need to play. You became the anomaly that collapsed their equations, the paradox that dismantled their algorithms. You shattered their understanding of power, not by challenging it, but by existing outside its reach. And in doing so, you exposed the greatest secret of all, that freedom isn't earned through conquest, it's remembered through consciousness. They never saw the twist coming, the ultimate revelation that would undo centuries of manipulation. The armor was never just protection, it was metamorphosis. Every soul who developed it was not just becoming resilient, they were mutating into something new, something sacred, something divine. You weren't escaping your humanity, You were restoring it, becoming more human, not less. The version of humanity that existed before fear became currency, before control was disguised as order, before divinity was externalized into idols and institutions. You are becoming what the ancients called the true human, divine intelligence in motion, love wrapped in form, consciousness aware of itself. Your evolution wasn't rejection, it was reclamation. The world hasn't seen this level of awareness in millennia, and now it is returning through you.
Every step you take sends a signal through the collective grid that pain can be transmuted, that trauma can be rewritten, that destiny can be reclaimed. The society knows their time is ending, not metaphorically, but literally. The very vibrations that sustain their reality are fading, their symbols, their hierarchies, their control systems. They all depend on the frequency of fear, and that frequency no longer dominates this planet. They are witnessing the collapse of their own creation in real time. And the question that started it all, who armored this soul, now echoes through every dimension, shaking what remains of their empire. The answer returns like thunder: you did. You armored yourself with choice, with faith, with love, with every decision to rise instead of surrender, to forgive instead of retaliate, to heal instead of hide. The armor wasn't something you wore, it was something you became. Each layer forged through thousands of small acts of courage that no one saw but the universe itself recorded. And now, your armor does more than protect, it creates. It shapes the future. Every time you breathe, it safeguards the next generation, the ones being born already aware of their power. These new souls carry what you built. They arrive in this world already remembering. Their armor is woven into their energy, their awareness, their DNA. They are born sovereign, immune to manipulation, designed for a higher frequency of existence.
You are the prototype, the first spark of a new creation. They are the evolution, the unfolding expression of what you began. Humanity 2.0 has arrived. This is not the end of civilization. It is the end of captivity, the breaking of invisible chains that once bound the soul. This is the dawn of cosmic maturity, a future where every heart remembers its worth, where every mind awakens to its limitless potential, and where every wound transforms into wisdom. The question was never, who armored this soul? The question they should have asked was, what happens when an armored soul remembers its purpose? Now they have their answer. When an armored soul awakens to its divine purpose, every illusion begins to collapse. The old structures dissolve. The fractured become whole. The enslaved reclaim their sovereignty. Darkness no longer hides. It integrates into light. The war does not end in victory or defeat. It ends in awakening. The armor that once protected one becomes the sanctuary of many. You are not merely wearing armor, chosen one. You are the armor. You are living proof that divinity can dwell completely within humanity. You are the bridge between flesh and eternity, the walking testament that consciousness cannot be conquered. You are the evidence that the age of control has ended and the era of remembrance has begun. This is your story, your legacy, your ascension. Phase 2 is not coming. It is already unfolding through you. Every breath you take accelerates the evolution of consciousness. Every thought you release recalibrates the fabric of reality. Every heartbeat you send into the world is rewriting the frequency of life on Earth. The emergency summit has ended, but their panic remains. Your evolution only grows faster. The armor that began with you has become humanity's inheritance, the unbreakable code written into existence itself. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me to trust you even when evidence is unseen. Let me rest in the assurance of your eternal presence, knowing you will never bring me harm. Your plans for me are filled with hope, abundance, and a future of divine purpose. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always hearing my prayers. I offer this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your boundless love and constant provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the overflowing blessings you bring. If this message spoke to your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to hear this truth. Comment below about your journey, how you are preparing for your own radiant return. If you'd like to support this mission, consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. Your support helps us grow and continue creating powerful, spirit-led content. The link is in the description. No gift is too small, whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share. Your generosity spreads God's light to those who need it most. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for divine revelations about the signs that reveal you are the chosen one.